Now, what happens if the pumping of protons and use of that energy to synthesize ATP is uncoupled? Just to show you here, there's all of this energy that's being burned during catabolism from various nutrients, be it sugars, lipids, or fatty acids, or amino acids, is captured in the end in most cells, or the cells that have mitochondria, by the electron transport chain. So it's a lot of energy that goes through, a lot of chemical energy that goes through the electron transport chain, and results in pumping of protons into the inner membrane space. And usually all of those protons are then used to perform work, aka to convert ADP back into ATP. However, there's a whole series of different types of proteins or drugs that can uncouple the process. They are called uncouplers. So they circumvent, they don't block the electron transport chain. They uncouple the ability of the electron transport chain to synthesize, the forced synthesis of ATP, by making the membrane permeable for protons. So even though protons are being pumped over there, they don't have to do any work whatsoever to get back into the matrix where they would like to go. So collapse in the proton synthesis, in the proton gradient, will result in a halt in ATP synthesis by the ATP synthase, which requires a proton gradient in order to perform its catalytic reaction. And if it's done on small doses, it's actually one way to produce heat. So you can, if you use an enzyme called UCP1, which is a tightly regulated enzyme, and in us can be found in brown fat, and hibernating mammals such as a cute sleeping bear have a lot of brown fat that they use to produce heat to keep the core of their body warm during cold winter sleep. The enzyme that the brown fat contains is UCP1, where it provides a way for the protons to go back to the matrix and couples it to vibration, which is heat, which results in the increase of the bear's body temperature above the room temperature of the temperature of his cave. Babies, actually, human babies, have a lot of brown fat as well to keep their little cores warm. So they will use energy from the mother's milk to heat themselves because they don't have yet any fat reserves to insulate themselves instead. And as we grow up, we lose the brown fat, and most of the brown fat deposits that children and babies have are converted to white fat. And it's a process called non-shivering thermogenesis. And here's an electron micrograph of the white fat, with the L here is the giant lipid vesicle from which, for every adipocyte, from which you draw the fatty acids when you get ready to dump fatty acids into the bloodstream. And you can see the white fat has little mitochondria, I mean plenty of them, but they're not huge. The brown fat of humans and other animals contains this big mitochondria, and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of them that will milk the fatty acids from the lipid vesicle of the brown fat. I mean, it still contains fat, and then convert it into heat to keep things warm. Now, many poisons and drugs can also inhibit, either uncouple the respiratory chain or inhibit it. We have not talked about a lot of the electron transport chain inhibitors during the electron transport chain because I felt it was overkill. But we did talk about one back when we discussed irreversible inhibition of proteins. So cyanide is one of these respiratory chain inhibitors. It's an irreversible inhibitor of complex 4. Another inhibitor that is very dangerous is an uncoupler of the electron transport chain, aka it makes it destroys the Proton gradient between the matrix and the inner mitochondrial space by allowing protons to get back into the matrix without having to go through the ATP synthase. And essentially, it was discovered back in the 30s and it was first marketed as a diet pill because if taken in small doses, it will allow you to burn sort of whatever fat deposits you want in much more efficiently than just by lifting weights or whatever, or not eating. But if taken in even slightly higher doses than what you take to get results, it will cook you alive. In fact, people regularly die from DNP. This particular lady died in the UK in 2015. It was a very famous case because she took she took about 8 pills, first 3, then 5, in a span of 12 hours, and because the uncoupling of the electron transport chain from ATP synthase does not just result in lack of ATP to the system. Most importantly, what it results in is a lot of generation of a whole lot of heat, something that your body cannot control. It will just, if it has any sort of nutrient reserves, it will dump them into the mitochondria in order to maintain ATP levels. But the ATP levels, the maintenance of ATP levels will also come as a byproduct of heating up the cells and denaturing all the proteins inside. So even though these pills are sold on the internet, please don't use them. It's a harsh death. So finally, this is a summary of what I've covered today. I know the lecture today was pretty short, but we really only talked about one enzyme. Your book also covers these various metabolite shuttles, such as the malate shuttle, and how ATP gets out of the mitochondrial matrix. I think it's the detail that is not necessary for an introductory class, but you're welcome to read through the chapters. So the chapter, I'm not going to test you on the shuttles. I hope you will have a great weekend.